Hey, good morning, afternoonish, whatever, and welcome to Relove Guitars. Sam here, and today we have the I got it right. I said standard. It's a traditional Gibson Les Paul traditional US of A. Now, this is brought to me by Mark, and yeah, so nice, beautiful looking old proper Gibson. So there we have it. I've had a couple of Gibsons through the shop, the shed, and I just, it's always interesting to me because I'm a skeptic when it comes to big brands. I don't venerate them just for the sake of it. So for me, it's always let's get this out of the way. Just hang there for a minute, soldering iron. Yeah, it's always a sort of, I don't know, they're not, I don't sort of bow down to them just for the sake of it. I'm interested about what's good about them and what makes them work, or what the flaws are that they suffer from, and so on and so on. So, and I don't believe per se that these things, just because they're Gibsons, have some inherent beauty and wonder and stuff. I know they're expensive, and I know that a lot of people favour them throughout history and so on and so on. So, but I'm quite, it's a funny word to use, but I'm guitaristically promiscuous. In other words, I like anything that makes a noise, and I don't kind of withhold judgment if I think something's not what it should be for the money. And actually, the thing is, most guitars for the money need a good setup, and so there's kind of almost no guitar that comes out, very few guitars that come out of the factory or the shop beautifully set up. Look, we've got 99% humidity today. What a great day for working in the shed. Yeah, very few guitars come out indestructible and free from bad setups, and the Gibsons seem to be not exempt from that at all. So I kind of read a lot online about people saying how the Gibsons won't stay, their Les Pauls won't stay in tune, or the finish is naff, or there's the bridge is misaligned and they can't intonate. There's all kinds of complaints which you'd sort of understand if you were getting from 150 quid Agile, or no, ARC or Agile or something, or even a Rally, £200 Rally from China. But when you're paying £1,800 or £2,000 or whatever, £1,500 for, I don't know what this one costs, but paying a lot of money for a USA made Gibson, you'd sort of want to be paying for something more than just the name. Now I know that this thing will have nice sounding pickups on it, and but my interest is just, having played more and lived with more Chinese copy Les Pauls than I have American Gibson Les Pauls. This makes an interesting comparison for me to just hold it, to set it up. Now the other Gibson Les Pauls and the other Gibsons, the SGs that I've set up, all required a bit of fret leveling to get to the kind of action that I was aiming for. Now this is unusual in that, compared to a Chinese Les Paul copy, this straight away I can see has a pretty low action already dialed in, which I would be sort of impressed with, for a copy. Apart from the rallies I've got have come with that sort of action. I'll measure everything up in a short while to see where we are, but but so straight away, if this was a copy or a Gibson, I'd be going, wow, that's a nice low action. But what we've got is, we've got bent notes. Now I think these are 10s, and I may be struggling to replace with 10s. I've got hybrid 9s, I think, spare at the moment. I might have a 10 actually. I'll dig around. But anyway, this is choking out at this low action. So clearly Mark likes this low action. I don't blame him. It's a very nice feel. But you can see that we're not getting those high notes. The thing about it too is that apparently this has been plecked, which is that so-called scientifically fabulous machine that does some sort of fret leveling and whatever it does. And I've tried to sort of do a little bit of research into it in the past, and it's very it looks like the appliance of science. It's very Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik, or Zanussi for those of you 80s kids. But yeah, it's quite mysterious, and if anything, it seems a little bit over complex, the sort of scientific, computerized, this, that and the other. And unless I'm mistaken, and I could very well be, what I haven't noticed is that whether the fret leveling system of the Plek does it with the strings on or off. And if it doesn't do it with the strings on, then it's not recreating the compression, which I find is quite important. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this guitar today, and my aim will be obviously to free up those bends, and there's a couple of, not too bad, there's a couple of slightly ropey notes here and there, but by and large it's pretty good. But what I'm going to do is try to very delicately, gently, elegantly even, aim to free up those notes with a little bit of fret work, and partly that will get rid of some of this fret wear down here as well. It'll also take care of, there's a nick up here, quite a deep nick, which is, you can feel it as you're bending the B string, so we'll aim to lose that as well, and give it an all over gentle clean, and we may replace the nut. So I'll give you a close up of this if I can. Got mosquitoes in here, it's like a swamp. Yeah, so there's the nut. It's nicely fitted and everything, and if it's bone and if it's working, then I will try not to mess with it, for the simple reason that it's nicer to keep the join. Usually it's lacquered over. I'm not sure if yeah, it is on this one too. So knocking it off breaks off that lacquer seal, and it's just a little nicety. You know, I've got loads of spare bone nuts, but the principle will be I won't change it if I don't need to, but if I do need to, it'll come off just like that. Now on this guitar as well, on the treble side, we've got a replacement non-standard tuning peg from another guitar, and this guitar got bumped by a child, I think, at some point, and so we've got this replacement on, and Mark's given me another one of these which we can fit. Now I've never fitted one of these to the thing, so I'm going to go and find out exactly how it goes on, whether it's a matter of heating up the metal first, or whether it's a matter of resining it on or gluing it on. I'll go and do a quick bit of research on that, but I've got a spare one, and this is a little bit wobbly, so we'll check and see if we can tighten up this unit here a little bit as well. I don't know if you heard that, but as soon as I tune, mostly on this, it's doing a fair bit of pinging on the nut, so the nut slots definitely need a little adjustment. Also, I suspect that the slots are going to need widening anyway. Ping. Ping. So let's give it a little fun tug. Ooh, loads. That actually moved forward in the tuner. Ready for it? Open D. Okay, so that's going to be horrible to play until so there's not enough wound on to keep these on the peg, hence they moved. But it's a combination of this, the string coming off under pressure, and that would happen just as a result of bends, not just a tug that I gave it. And the other little down tuning bits are a result of just pulling slack out the string. So you know, it's like a lot of things. People complain about strats going out of tune when you use a tremolo, for you know, and so on. And actually, if you get the nut right and you get this slack all pulled out of the string thoroughly, like I've said many times before, it can take up to half an hour to get it to stabilize. Providing number one priority, the nut slots are right, wide enough, and there's no gripping at all. And by the way, I've said this loads of times, but don't try and cure it with a lubricant first. You've got to get it the right width, even if it means working slowly with sandpaper and a blade. Right depth for the first fret action and right width. Once that's completely free moving and there's no pings, which there still is on here, then you'll have you're halfway to tuning stability. The other half is getting rid of all of the slack in the strings. Now that little pull through on here just then was the result of these only being wound on half a string, and actually the pull, which I was a bit rough with it, but you know, it's kind of like lots of bends, that actually pulled some slack out of here as it tightened up that lock. So it's not a bad way of locking the strings. You don't necessarily need more on, but what you certainly need to do is have it really jammed tight against it. And the only way to pull out that incipient slack is to give it that mega pull right at the beginning, and then you're done. And any further pulls like this will put it slightly out of tune, but decreasingly each time you do it. So you know, this kind of roughness is really, really important. Now these bottom strings will be out of tune again, but far less than they were when I was actually pulling them tight around the peg. Now because of that, we're only really at the beginning of the process of pulling the slack out of there. See, the top ones are nearly there. Okay, so yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little play through as is, just to hear the legendary quality of the Gibson humbuckers. I always apologise at this point because unfortunately my playing can't really do a guitar of this legendary quality justice, but I'll have a little play for my own edification. I went to an open mic night last night, which was funny. My second go at standing up on my own, which is the scary bit. So I went and played, I did 2 songs last night. It's warm now. We're 15 degrees, we're almost in November. Yeah, I played A Day in the Life by the Beatles. Oh, right, let's get the tremolo off. Day in the Life by the Beatles, and Free Falling by Tom Petty. And I got the audience, or the guitar playing audience, because it was a lot of people who were playing there. Got them to play the rising crescendo in Day in the Life, which actually went pretty well, and then I went and messed up by forgetting everything in the middle section, the bit that goes most of that bit out. I screwed it up because my battery faded on the acoustic, the studio acoustic I was using, and I couldn't hear. Anyway, then I quickly went back into it. All that little sort of bit. But I got the people to join in with I'd love to turn you on. I've got the whole bunch of people playing things with mandolins and bass guitars. That big chord at the end, so it was quite good fun. Good bit of audience participation, ruined by the performer, but there we go. So here we are with the Gibson USA Les Paul, and so I'll give you a first impression, right? In truth, does this feel any different from the vintage V100 in weight or an Epiphone? Doesn't feel any different to me. It has a slightly thicker neck, which is than some of the vintage ones. What I'm doing is I'm on just a sort of jazz chorus sound here and a bit of reverb. blind test, but I like that sound. How do I describe it? It's got some depth and dynamics to it. For a bridge pickup, I think I've used this description before, and it's really crude, and I'm not a pickup aficionado, connoisseur or anything, so I'm really crude, it's really subjective when I describe it. But in the past I've described guitars like this. When you get to this kind of quality pickup, in my experience, the bridge pickup makes you think you're playing in the middle pickup of a vintage or some other budgety guitar. In other words, the kind of dynamics you get in the bridge position of lots of other guitars on a good quality guitar or great quality pickups, you could be, for somebody like me who's more used to playing a Chinese copy, I could play this. Somebody said, what position is that on this guitar? I might be tempted to think it was the middle pickup, simply because it has it has the clarity about it, but it has some roundness and depth and dynamic to the sound, instead of just being shrill. It's got a nice cut to it as well. And then into the middle. And it's got more of that. Terrible description. Curved, rounded, bell, bong, yeah, how do you describe it? Nice. Now this neck pickup. Nice tone. It's always that way. The geometry of the curve means a low action often struggles to go uphill on the fret and then come back downhill to the lower anchor point down here, so that the clearance gets swallowed up as you go higher up the hill. It's bizarre. You'd think that if you're playing off there you'd have the same amount as the G has, but you don't, because you're going back to a lower point down here. So you have to visualize it in 3D to make sure you get what's going on. Now I believe if you put these pickups into an Epiphone Les Paul or a vintage V100 or a Rally, for example, then you'd have a guitar that sounded as good as this. The only difference, really, the fundamental difference being, this has got some cute little nibs on the end, which of course make it Difficult for the refretter, possibly. Yeah, it makes it harder for the refretter. Probably not impossible, but harder. You've got some kind of nicer squared off tuners. The vintage and copies and things, when they use these Clousson style ones, is it Clousson? I don't know, well, these square ones. The cheaper they are, the sort of more gloopy and rounder they are, the less precise they are. These Gibson ones, I've had a set of these before, and I bought them a set. I got them for 20 quid. It was a very good bargain, since you can buy one of these for about £6. I've got one lined up if this other thing doesn't match, but they're more precise feeling, but it's the same in a way that they're not that much different inside. You know, hardware, yeah, you've got the Gibson bridge without the convenience of the tuner, the raising lower screw. This one, Mark's got the stop bar wound down to the deck for better sustain, and he comes over the top. And who knows, that might make a little difference. But generally speaking, in terms of absolute feel and even look, this is as nice and not any more nice or lesser than a couple of great quality rallies or even some of the vintage cherry sunbursts. It's lovely, you know, and of course a nice touch is the the slightly reddened blush on the binding, or on the lacquer over the binding, which you know is a nice little, it gives it a little, yeah, like a blush, tomato blush. But you know, when you even look at that, it's not exactly precise, whatever which way you cut or slice it, and it feels exactly as heavy as, neck is a little bit thicker than some of the vintages, but and probably a little thicker than the rallies too. And this is different construction on the back. This is a one piece by the look of it. Oh, sorry, three pieces, two on the side and one right through the middle, which of course makes them, I think this is why they're susceptible to snapping off. But it's lovely sound. I'm trying to learn the Sultans of Swing thing. I've been arsing about playing it for 30 years, just jamming it for fun. See that tune again. And I've decided I'm going to learn every single lick in there, so I've been doing it for about a couple of days now, and you know, it's great fun. There's some fabulous little licks in there, things like that. And he's got lots of little country file triplets and pairs of notes and stuff. Tune, sorry about that. So I'm going to have such fun. I'm going to learn all the bits. Then I'm going to get on to playing it with a backing track. But there's the second solo is there's that bit that I know the notes in it kind of. But he doesn't play it like that at all. It's much better. So that's going to be a nightmare to learn. And then there's a the end bit. But yeah, so there's a couple of technically really hard bits. The rest of it seems to be a battle of learning where things fall. You know. Check out Guitar George. He knows all the chords. Here's strictly rhythm. You don't want to make a cry saying. Keep going. I'm going to play that one of these days, along along with an accompaniment and then maybe with someone else. But it would be really cool to play it on your own. Anyway, enough digressions into the Sultans of Swing on the wrong guitar. I haven't heard this thing with a bit of grunge on it, so let's put it up to rectifier-tastic mode. Woo. Let's get a tune. That's going out of tune now because it's pinging in the slot, it's catching. Same with the B and the E. Oh, that's a great sound. Alright, I'll let these pickups off, I like them. Hello Morris, what do you think? Gibson American Les Paul. Yeah, you pick up, yes you're right, the pickups are superb. No, don't wipe your nose up there! Oh god. Cleaning rag, not your bum either. Sorry about this one. It always does that, I always have to clean them. What do you reckon? Alright. You need to get on your... Oh, you can't. Sorry, there's a pile of orphan truff rods. Pile of truff rods on his stool over there. Let me just go and move them. Sorry, Morris. Come on, Morris. There we go. Truff rods removed. I might recondition a couple of those into special fret leveling tools. How are you doing? Yeah, where's your mum? She's left home again, hasn't she? Yeah. She's a bit of a stop out. But she votes with her feet. Oh god. Sorry. She votes with her feet, does his mum. And she gets a bit fed up with being with everybody. Sorry. And then she takes off for... Could be 4 months again this time, but then things are kind of peaceful when she's gone, and there's just him and his sister and the aging Sid, who had to go to the vet the other day. Sorry about this pause. I want to get on with this guitar, but we have to get you down onto your seat, your seat of observation. There you go. Look, you can see the world from your seat. Enjoy. Stay there, please. Stay there, please. There's a good boy. No! No, Morris. No, Morris. Alright, I'm going to have to do this. Morris! I'm going to be doing spraying things. Come on, you want to get... I'm sorry about that. See you later, Morris. It's not cruel. Don't report me, please. It's just... He doesn't like that sound. Dumb down. Just had to do a bit of spraying. Okay. Real-Time Movies presents Gibson American Les Paul. So what I'm going to do is I have a going tool. By the way, in case you're wondering, this is my first Oakcaster homemade fun guitar. Doesn't really fit in this hanger thing. Stay there, yeah. That was good, made out of oak block. Great fun. Took that on holiday last year. Was it last year? Seems like a million years ago. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some measurements on this thing, just see where we're starting from, including the string gauge. Nines. There's nines. Oh gosh. Gosh. Any more on the bottom of there? Nines. Nines. More nines. Wait a second. Is that it? Where to's my other one's tool? Gosh. I seem to be missing a set of strings. And oh. Una Paloma Blanca. I seem to be short of a set of... Oh no, wait a minute. Take-ins, that's the ones. Woohoo! Yeah, I'm going to take a load of measurements now and see where we are. So I'm going to probably put my funky spectacles on. Dusty ones. I've been doing some sanding in here and stuff. So I'm going to get my pen out for the marking of last fret high E, last fret low E, we're going to go relief, we're going to go first fret action, we're going to go E, B, G, D, A, E, so more of an approximation than anything, but so let us begin. We've got room to move, get the right end of things. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, some people go, why do you measure the last fret? And there's a kind of reason for it. It's just a habit of mine, I prefer to do it. Because in a way, the last fret is slightly less dependent on the relief curve. If you measure in the middle and you make a tiny adjustment to your truss rod, your action can change substantially here but barely change there at all. It's all to do because the end of the curvature stops here, so I prefer to measure the playing action on the last fret here. Now we have got a 1 point, I would say this is 1.3, last fret low E, 1.3 millimeters. That's pretty low, which kind of, okay, you've been through a Plek machine, you'd expect it. Now we've got an astonishingly low action here. For my purposes, this is clocking up at 0.75. That's lower than I would go. So this is going to be a real challenge for me to get these bends freed up. However, the interesting bit is that the bends on this aren't the result of this action low being so low on the high E. It's a result of the string pushing across to the what I would call the G track by the time it reaches there. So it hits the G track, and the combination of the low action and this reduction down the curve runs out of any clearance room. Now it's probably, this is the point in time where somebody else might put a backwards fall away in this, and it's not something I've done or particularly want to do. So because actually it's incredibly low action, what I will do is I'll play around with the action, see if this is a level frets issue or whether it's just the limits of geography, but geometry. The truth is, with a if this is a standard 12, I don't know, but I'll check it. If it's a 12-inch radius, then if this was a 7.25 radius, you wouldn't get below about 1.5 millimeters for your last fret action. It just physically is impossible to rise up the steep curve of the fret and then come back down to a low point on your radiused saddle or your radiused saddles. Just the geometry won't allow you to get that low. Equally, a 9.5 is a bit more forgiving. You can get down to about 1.2 millimeters, and a 12 you can easily get, well, relatively easily get to a millimeter, but this is pushing it at 0.75. So that's the first measurement taken. The second one is going to be relief, for which point I'm just going to cap over the strings at the first fret and just thingy the word, press the last E string down on the last fret, and then I'm looking for a sort of equidistant point. Now people count frets and stuff, but you can pretty much, between the first fret and the last fret, you can find yourself what is pretty, if you're good at gauging things, that one or that one, they're pretty much equidistant or pretty much in the center. And what you're looking for is what's the gap here. Now there's a comfortable gap, which we'd want some. But it's definitely, so you know, first of all, it's not a back bow, which is fine. Secondly, it's not flat, which is fine too. Some guitars will play with, most guitars will play with a completely flat neck, but it depends on the other variables in the equation. So that if you've got, typically if you want a flat neck, you tend to have to go a little higher on the action, because either which way you have to make room for the strings to spin. Now if you create a curve in the neck, the strings can spin a bit more in that curve you've made. If you don't want the curvature and you absolutely want it flat, then you have to tend to find you'll be forced to raise the action a little bit to avoid getting fret slap. If you've got, in a way, the radius doesn't really make that much difference, because it's obviously the bridge follows the radius usually, unlike the on Hughes Electra Vulcan, where the neck radius is supposed to be 7.25 all the way down, but in fact it was 7.25 there, 9.5 there, and 12 on the original equipment bridge, which was very odd. Anyway, so I would be looking to say, well, what's the gap here? Where's my halfway point all day? Okay, so it's over 0.2, so it's comfy. It could be as high as 0.4 for all I know. No, it's a bit under that, so it's about 0.3, somewhere in between. So now, I mean, the thing is, you can change this around. It's just a fraction over 0.3, but I'm going to call it 0.35 at the outset. I could adjust that or take it out or flatten it a little bit more, and the issue then is what happens. Why would I do that? What would the customer notice? And if I flattened it out a little bit more, you might find you get string slap as opposed to fret buzz or choke. That's a different thing. You might find the strings start hitting the frets more, like if I bend this back now, right? You're going to get more likely to have the strings hit the frets. But you'd get just a tiny fraction lower feel of the action here. You'd hardly notice it up here at all, but it wouldn't in any way help to wouldn't help us to achieve that action there. Now, I'm saying I'm being conservative, and I'm saying on a low fret, a low action like this, a 0.75 ultra low action on this guitar, I'm saying that I'm not optimistic to be able to free up the bends, those choked off bends on this action, because it is lower than even I would probably go. However, it may be that my gentle, I wouldn't be surprised if my gentle curved level with the neck under compression as I do may just eke us out that last little bit without having to raise the action. But to be honest, I'm listening to what Mark said to me. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Two shakes. It's all right. False alarm. Are you on? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in talking to Mark about it, he wasn't too much bothered about that. In that wasn't something he would be doing a lot of up there. But being me, I would like to see. But actually, what this is a good example of, the customer has brought the guitar for a setup, and what he wants this to play as well as it can. What he's got here is some wear and these frets, and he's got a chip up here that's getting in the way of wherever it's gone now. It's a chip that's it's clicking out. There we go, on one of these frets. So and there's a choking of notes up here that aren't his primary concern. So he's presented me with a guitar where the action is actually pretty good for a Les Paul. So I would be happy, or be kind of pretty proud to have got a good playing guitar down at that action. Now what I'm faced with is this challenge of, where's that? That's going over the yeah, I'm bending that over the nick in the fret. So yeah, I've got this challenge: is can my technique clean this up? But it's not my priority. My priority will be to remove the wear, to just gently clean up the tops of the frets and reprofile them, because I'm looking here and they're a little bit flattened, maybe from time, or from maybe the machining that did the leveling. But either which way, we've got some wear, we've got a nick. Those two things are kind of important to clear up to make the guitar as good as it can be. And in the process, my aim will be, can we free up these notes with the 0.75. Now, the other thing about it is, if I go to 0.95 and it's freed up those notes, and I've cleared up the grooves and the wear, then I'll go to 0.9 or something like that. The difference between that and 0.75 in terms of playing feel is so tiny that you'll have gained all these spends for the loss of almost nothing in the way of terms of comfortable playing action. So it's a good compromise to make. But as you can see, it's always a play-off between these things. Now, third thing on my list of checks. First one is the last fret action. Then whichever way around, you could do the relief, not 0.35. Last fret action is currently really low. Next one is, I just want to see what we've got here in terms of the first fret action. Now, I would expect of a well set up guitar, which this appears to be, this action to be very low, and actually it looks very precise, although the D looks a little bit lower than everything else. So I'm going to be surprised. I'm going to probably find that this, just looking at it, I think this is lower than I would go normally. Now what I would go normally is usually a huge improvement to most people's guitars, but this is starting out at various different things. I'm going to do them one by one to some degree if I can, because I'm interested in what they're currently set at, as in what they're at and why. So I'm going to go 0.15. This is lower than I would go personally. This is capo level now. Holy moly. That is, I have to say, that is practically non-existent. And actually, if there wasn't a groove in there, it might not have any clearance at all. That's not true, it wouldn't play, but... Right, we're down to... holy... 0.5, held it down, that plays. This is the lowest action I've ever seen on any guitar. See if I can make it play on 0.1. Yeah, I tell you, okay, we're at 0.1. Wow. That is, I mean, what's good is that it's clearly following the rules of a well set up guitar. 0.1, but what we'll then find is that the next one is probably different. Don't often measure all of them, just interested here. No. 0.1, let's try. I'd say it's about just under 0.15, so 0.14. Let's call it for fun. I'm just going to take this out of the way for a second. We'll go for the... I think this is a bit higher. Is the G a bit higher? I think it is. Not that much. Wow, this is a... So, I mean, I guess the point here is that this is very low, and in terms of thinking about what the customer is used to and what they're familiar with, then it's important to not change it vastly unless there's a problem with it. So we are. This is the lowest set of first fret actions that I've come across on a guitar. So you know, maybe the result of the Majestic Plek machine. It may have gone, by the look of this, it may have gone for a target of 0.1 millimeters all the way across. This is incredibly low. I'm going to go this is below 0.1, below 1/10 of a millimeter. Sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but I'm very interested in the precision lowness of this. It's quite unusual. Okay, so I'm going to go on 0.75. Oh, let's call it 0.8. That's more like that. 0.8. Now on the D, let's put these back in and go the other way. I'll start low, I think. So the interesting thing is that the first fret action is so low on this. It's very incredibly low. I would say that's about 0.8 again. as long as it's between 0.5 and 0.1. Yeah, I mean, people generally think this is impossible to play. Wow, impossible to play. Actually, this is practically not anywhere. That's a joke. That's 0.4. It's below 0.5. Wow, this is by far the lowest action on any guitar, apart from ones where they actually overcut and they're touching the floor, touching the fret. That won't help. Get it on the thing. But you can hear this one. It's hitting that first fret just slightly, but some people. It's interesting that a lot of guitars, even some Gibsons from the shop, will come with an action that's nearly a millimetre over the first fret. We're talking now. This guitar is set with everything around 1/10 of that height. Okay, that is a massive difference in terms of a factor of 10 or whatever, 10 times greater. So you can see that it bears out what I've always said, which is that anything above 0.1 is more than you get when you capo. A capo tends, on a low action, a capo tends to impose around about a 0.1 millimetre, unless of course your action's 2 inches down the bottom here, which is obviously that will increase too. On a typical playing action, a capo will put about a 0.11 to 0.15 depending on the action down here, and it becomes very easy to play. This machine, or whatever the setup on here has done, has set this at a capo style action, so it's gone to that end of it, as opposed to 10 times greater than some of the nuts which haven't been plecked or whatever, coming out on the 1500 quid Gibsons I've seen in shops. But it goes to prove what I've always said, which is the lower the action there without buzzing off the first fret, you don't want to spin the strings and hit the first fret, but the lower you go there, the easier the guitar is to play, and the less likely you're going to get these intonation problems, which you can get about 0.6 on that one, 0.6, which you can get when the first fret action is too high and you have to press further than ideal to get to the first few frets, in which case you get the note going sharp and it messes up your open chords. So when I started doing this, if kind of 0.6 was a dangerous zone because you were getting those intonation effects, I went back, I checked with the capo, and it told me about 0.1 was an absolute optimum. I went conservatively back from that to about 0.2. Between 0.2 and 0.3 was my target for an electric guitar, never higher than 0.3. And this is a good example of a setup that's gone to 0.1 to prove that it can be done as much as anything else. Quite hard to get these to sit straight, you have to wiggle around a bit. Still, even that one's below. So yeah, an unusually low action, but like I said, I would err towards this than not. Again, this is probably about 0.6 or 0.7. Okay, so that's an incredibly low first fret action, but it contributes to the guitar having an extremely light feel to play down here. And that's what I like, and that's what I aim for ease of playing. Great for people learning bar chords and so on, and also perfect for not getting these intonation. I haven't got a guitar I can demonstrate that on, but obviously, because I changed them all, but above 0.5 you'll get these fretting intonation problems. I can't do it here, it's not high enough, but hear the difference between that, and that little, that's what you get when you have to press harder to make it reach the first fret. Anyway, so that doesn't have that problem. Now, are they too low? I think the D definitely is. You can hear it buzzing on the first fret. Now the question is, when I fret level this gently, that gap is going to open up very, very slightly. And the question I've got is, do I replace this nut and kind of work backwards to probably more like 0.15 as a target, which is similar to what it was but not quite as low, or do I leave this nut in with its variations? As I say, anything from, we've got the highest at 0.14, which is the B, we've got the lowest at 0.4, which is the D, and kind of everything in between that. So lowest 0.4 all the way up to 0.14, so there's a difference of 1/10 of a millimetre between those two strings, and there's no reason for it. It's just very hard to cut that accurately with machine or by hand. So the kind of rule of thumb is, moving away from that, it's going to feel different for the customer. Okay, if I go up to, let's say I went up to a factory setting, stuck a nut in and go, oh, 0.5 millimetre, something like that, that's what they recommend, it will feel awful. He would hate it, I guarantee it. If he's used to playing this, he would hate it. So I would need to take my cue from this, and I would say, look, what is a reasonable amount? Well, I would aim for 0.15 and kind of go either, you know, whatever you land up at either side of that, because it's very hard to get exact. And for that would have to be bone, which I've got. With this, the question for me is, when I do fret leveling to remove these grooves here, how much is this going to take off? And I can't tell you the exact fraction of a millimetre. What I do know is these gaps will all increase very slightly. Now, I think what I'll do is I'll do the fret leveling with this nut, and I will aim to clean up these little grooves and this nick up here, and see if we can get those, ease up those last high string bends on the E. If we can do that, then I'll remeasure the gaps here and just get a sense of whether this is enough, and certainly for the D, whether we've just got rid of that little bit of zing at the top there. And if we have, then I'll leave that nut in for the fact that it's precisely cut. I might just make a difference on the G just to balance it out with the others, because the rest of them are all, you know, if the D becomes 0.6, the rest will be between 0.6 and 0.12, something like that. So maybe the E and the D might get a tiny tweak, and then they'll all be, it'll be the equivalent of shimming the nut really, but I don't want to knock this off and break this nice seal if I don't have to. So that's my plan. Leaving this nut in here will have no negative effect on doing the fret leveling. The fret leveling is about the relative levelness of the frets while fully strung and the neck both curved, but actually the curved is immaterial. It's more, the important bit is the neck is compressed, and that's what I'm going to do. So there you go, long time of sort of faffing and fiddling and thinking, but that's what I prefer to do to get a sense of what I'm aiming to do. Once I've done the gentle, very, very gentle fret leveling for this guitar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take obviously these are sacrificial strings, I'll take them off, and with the strings off I'll take the tuner apart. Ooh, it's a bit crunchy. Take that tuner apart and I'll see what we can do to either slightly improve it, but also replace the mismatched thing. What do they call that thing? You know, the green looking, snot coloured thing, windery thing. Petal, leaf, tulip, knob. Insert name here. Oh no, hang on. Sounds like a bad case of extras. With those of you who've seen it will know. Extra starring Keith Chegwin and Ricky Gervais. Anyhow, like I said, real time. There's never really any editing on these videos, so sorry. So I'm just basically marking up. Oh, the other thing I noticed about this guitar, by the way, the inlays fit nicely, so they do look a little nicer than most of the copies I've ever seen, in that they are more precisely routed or hand, whatever the word is that they've done, you know, the means they've done with. There's far less sort of visible signs of gloop around the edges that you tend to get with the Chinese made things. Yeah, so they're very tidy. That's one other little thing. And also the rosewood, whatever kind of rosewood it is quite, the grain's quite visible, so it's not a smooth like polished rosewood. It's quite a, sorry about this expression, a hoary one. It's probably not a woodworker's expression, but I wanted to use it for now. I know what I mean. Just going to give everything a bit of a pull first to try and seat it back on the strings as pegs. So for the fret leveling, I want this in tune, not because the tune is, the pitch itself isn't the important thing, it's just as close to the playing tension as possible. Now if I was a technical genius, I could probably, because when I do each of these sort of strips, I move one of the strings out of the way. Now that technically will reduce the pressure on the neck, reduce the tension on the neck, and as a result, you could quite rightfully argue that it's changing or reducing, relieving slightly the amount of pressure on the neck, the compression on the neck. It's absolutely true. And to this day I haven't worked out a clever system for simulating that, compensating it with all the other strings. I could do, technically it would be possible, but do you know what, the result is pretty good as it stands, and I haven't got enough life spare to really worry about trying to get that scientific with it, baby. You know, it's feasible. You could do such a thing. I can't be bothered. The results might be imperceptibly better, and so I'm sure some technical nerd. The katana system that you can buy that does the same job is kind of a little bit more convenient in that you don't have to move that one string as you're going along, and consequently it would give you the benefit of keeping the exact playing tension. But as I said, I've never noticed a problem with it, so it's always done me proud the way I've used it so far. So if it ain't exactly that broke, I'm not going to fix it that much either. Okay, there's my little bit of old stuff. This has lasted a long time, all this whatchamacallit, self-adhesive gloop, bought from G&W Woods in Portugal. Does some good wood blocks and things for guitar setups, neck rests, radius blocks, and also some very nice quality acrylic templates which I now use. I bought a couple of his MDF ones which are cheaper, but in a way they're a false economy versus buying, if you're going to do more than one, they're definitely a false economy. You might as well spend slightly less than, I can't remember now, but slightly less than twice the price buying the acrylic ones, perspex ones, acrylic, whatever, which are a little bit thinner, so they change the way you, slightly change the way you do your routing, but they're more precise, and they don't get shaggy after a while, whereas the MDF ones just tend to round off of their own free will, because they're soft, very hairy, soft material, shaggy material. Anyway, so I am just going to attach my self-adhesive thing. I've just burnt a load of crap old mechs, but I nicked a load of truss rods out of them while I was at it, because I hate throwing bits of metal in a burner. It seems a bit silly because they don't burn. So basically damn, no, don't do this to me. I took wherever possible, I just grabbed the truss rods out of there, and some of them might be usable for this little carry-on. We shall see. Anyway. with this, it makes a lot of sense to change out the paper every time. I use 400 on this. I've also got some 200 grit paper up there, which if I'm feeling particularly confident or something, I might put on there and bash away with that. But obviously I prefer, when it comes to frets, I prefer the less is more and the slower is better approach. Hence I use 400 most of the time. You know, and if you're feeling nervous and you're doing this for the first time, you could go even finer than that. It will take the fret metal away. It'll just do it at a slower rate, and you'll feel you may feel less pressured. You know, if you go at it with a 200 grit, 220 grit, which I've got, sometimes you might feel you're taking it too quickly. You might get a little bit freaked out. When you do this method anyway, it's quite easy to get freaked out anyway, because if you've never seen, it's like surgery I suppose, if you've never seen frets cutting up on a guitar, you can feel like you're killing your guitar pretty quickly, and you have to have confidence in the system. You know, and you can gain that by practicing on old necks, or old guitars actually is the best. Now with this, the aim of this game is to balance up these little devices. Victor, I don't know if Vic's watching this, Victor sent me some very cool fret leveling tools, which I've got to, caramba, I've got to wait until such times as I've got a test guitar, not of the Gibson quality, to work on. This is a different approach altogether. But Vic's like me, he's a fabulously nerdy when it comes to fret leveling, so we've been having this long-winded conversation about what works and what doesn't. For this I'm going to stick to my known quantity approach, but suffice to say that there's other ways to do it, and I'm looking forward to trying Victor's method out one day. So this one is the match the curve. Victor's method matches the curve by just gently pressing it on. This matches the curve by mimicking it and then holding it in position, and it's very sensitive, and if you're really mathematical, which I'm not, you can probably kind of start to go, oh, hang on a minute, hang on, there's some compromises, and of course there are. You know, if you know a bit about any of the shape of these necks, you'll know that clearly there's some compromise going on here. First of all, if you know that so long as there's some curvature in the neck, you know that this neck goes curve, stop, straight. Okay, so straight away, if I'm making a curve that takes into account that uphill and then straight, it's an approximation featuring a straight bit, so which in a sense flattens out the curve a little bit. So technically, anybody thinking clear-headedly would say, well, you know what, if you could technically over curve slightly, because really what you're doing is you're lessening the curve to accommodate this flat spot. And in a way I quite like that, because that's my built-in conservative factor. In other words, I'm approximating what is the exact curve between these 3 points, but in truth it's slightly less than the curve on this curved bit of the neck, but it's a composite of these two parts of the guitar. Now my experience has been, what it does is that it may under address just slightly the curve here. What it does is it does a little scalloping effect here, scalloping, whatever, a little leveling effect here, that brings this part in line with the overall curve. So it's quite nice, and actually quite often what I find is I end up doing a sort of second one just to level it out when it's this precise, but I don't know if I'll do it here. But it seems to work, and I can't explain to you scientifically why it works, scientifically, but I know it does work through practice. So I'm getting this matched up straight away. So what I can tell you now is that truss rod is approximating, or it is a composite curve that takes into account this curvature plus the flattened bit, which is more or less flat depending on the guitar. This now a feeling this might actually be the 220, so I'm going to take this very slowly. I'm pretty sure it was a 400. New 400 can feel incredibly bitey. So I'm just basically I'm using nothing but gravity here with this sandpaper. It's brand new sandpaper, so it's kind of cutting away nicely without any encouragement. And a testament to how good this setup is already, it's cutting evenly all the way across, except there's a little bit of a gap there. Not a gap, it's touching the frets, but it's just, that would be a low spot in this whole sequence. What I'm pleased to notice is that it's starting to cut on the these frets here, or it's cutting on those frets. So we're gonna remove that that fret wear, and I also obviously want it to take away the nick, which is here. I've got to just remember it's what is it? It's 12th, 14th fret, and keep an eye on the 14th fret. I'll write that down because I'm hopeless at remembering little things like that. 14th fret. Okay, so 14th fret plus general wear down here is my target, my prime priority. Alright, so just my first little brush with the thing was a diagnostic, if you like, and I'm just going to go back with this. It is literally on gravity on this guitar. I don't want to put any pressure on the rod at all. I don't want to deform it artificially by pushing too hard anywhere. I'm just letting it do its abrasive work under gravity, and like I said, it's doing, what I can see is it's just less there, some there, which is great because it's getting rid of my dents down there, and what we're getting up here is a little sort of pile up here, which is what you'd expect from this, what I would call the congestion caused by the flat meeting the curved, and that's great. Now at this point, what's great about this method is I can put these back straight back in, and putting this gently off to one side, I can now, without any further ado, test play every note, which was playing before, but my priority, if you remember at this point, is getting rid of the grooves, and so I'm looking at the grooves, and there's still a little tiny bit down there, which I'll do a little fraction more. So I'm about cleaning up the frets until I get to the G, and then I'm about bending. I'm looking to see, is my leveling helping to just free up that bend. If we can at 0.75, it will be nothing short of miraculous. So I'm just working this right near the edge, and obviously I'm covering the whole range of that string, what I call the E track, which crosses over in part with the B track obviously, but I'm just aiming here I want to get rid of that chip, and I want to get rid of those grooves at the top, which we've got rid of the grooves. They're gone on definitely on the E track. That's great. And I think we've got rid of the chip. Oh, there's a hint of the chip, but it's in the B track, so we'll take most of it away in the B track. So there's that done. Now, as always, even though I'm using effectively the same track, I'm going to recalibrate just as a sort of, to make sure that it hasn't moved, or the winding thing the adjuster hasn't miraculously moved, and by and large this is still on track for the right shape, and I do this on every track that I do. So then I move the B string out of the way. I've spread the string down here with my little rubber. This is a piece of rubber piping or some kind of thick rubber, but it's very useful. So now again I'm concentrating primarily on letting this thing do its work under gravity. I can spot the dents or the wear grooves because they still hold the ink from the marker pen, and I want to, in this track, what I call the B track, I want to get rid of both the grooves down this end as well as the chip up here in the B track. So I'm allowing the rod to kind of walk its way over the radius backwards and forwards, and again I want this to do most of its work, or all of its work, under gravity. So again, beauty of this method is I can just drop everything in, everything's playing great. It was before pretty good, pretty well, but I've still got some wear grooves there which I've got to take out, so a little bit more work on the wear grooves to get rid of them, and then we've got the 14th fret up here. We're pretty much all gone on the chip at that end, which is fine. So I'm going to just keep my attention on this end a little bit. very gently handling this to, if anything, I'm just guiding it with this hand. I'm not really pressing it or anything. I'm just letting it do its work, you know, with the view of just gently ironing out those wear grooves. And it's obviously going to cut everywhere it touches, which is quite natural. We're expecting that. It's not a problem. It's part of cleaning up all of the frets. And we've got almost all of the grooves, except there's a little bit left in these two here. I'm going to do something. I'm just going to recheck at this point. I may just slightly curve this a tiny fraction more. Because remember, this curve is a composite, so it's conservative. It's not quite the same. It's not quite as deep as the curve. So I'm just going to feel how it. Oh, I'm in the wrong slot for a minute. Hang on, we're still working on the B. Go back, words. Okay, so just checking it. And on this one, it needs a tiny fraction more of a curve. It's just lifting over the middle one, but the adjustment is so delicate that it's easy for it to wander fairly quickly. Okay, I like that. I'm going to go with that, and I expect that to just pick up those frets that are getting the lightest touches at the moment, and that will help me get into those little groove spots there. So you can see this is a mixture of experience and trust in what the tool does, and you can only get that by getting to grips with it and using it. But once you do get the sense of confidence in how it works, you'll be amazed at how good it is to use. The same is true of the expensive commercially available tool. It's just whether or not if you're the kind of DIY sort, you'll do it yourself, and if you're happy to pay, you'll buy the tool. Nice. Now, still choking off, but it's choking off on the G track. So here is the telling bit now. We're going to calibrate for the G track, and we're going to now see what we can do with both removing any grooves in the G track, leveling it precisely using this method, and that's a little bit over curved for the G, and then we'll see if we free up those bends. I have to say I'm not overly hopeful. It's just knowing the numbers as I do. It's what happened to the... Okay, I've lost my mind. Oh, it's under here. I'm not overly hopeful because I know from the numbers that 0.75 on the first fret is an incredibly low action for even the best of the LPs. I've not seen any Epiphones or Gibsons with this kind of action before, so this is an unusually low action. So I'm just again gently working away with the G track, the range of where the G string goes. Now I can see a gap here, low fret, that's opening up, and I just kind of stop when I think I've got a bit of wear still there. There's a tiny bit, no, it's a flake of something. There's a tiny bit of wear still in that second fret, so I'll keep an eye on that. I mean, ideally, if we can do it without taking too much material, we'd like to take out all the grooves. A little bit of nearly there, you see that? That was choking off completely before. We're almost there. Wow! See, now that you're hearing with your own ears what this method does, and I'm really pleased with that. Now I'm going to recalibrate because I want to get this. I want to achieve this, so you can see. Like I said, I'm being cautious, and I wouldn't have put money on being able to get those bends out of this because it's too low, or it's a hugely low action. But lo and behold, this fabulously elegant method is producing the goods. So I'm just going to let it work a little bit more. I'm conscious of, you know, both ends doing what they do. Just trying to sort of guide it. I'm conscious that it's this end as well that needs to have that perfect level. The clearance in the process of this is so tiny. It's actually more amazing that it works at all. You know, absolutely tiny amounts of distance. So. Like it. Now that combined with, I would say, half a tenth, no, what's half a tenth? A fifth of a millimetre up on that, rather than taking any more off, that would be absolutely perfect. Or even actually the difference with the sanding might just make the difference there. So I'm going to stop right there on that one, because we've got them freed up. Remarkably, to my surprise. So there you go, folks. This method works. I mean, I know I've done it for about 400 different times, so I know it works, but you've got to hear it with your own eyes. I'm going to take a break shortly. I think I need a break. I'm just checking this. That's pretty much spot on again, so I'm going to work on the D track. Now remember, the D is sitting in a very, very low action at the moment. And I'm hoping that this bit of work on the D track now is going to lower the fret just enough in the process of removing the grooves that we want to remove and leveling out everything else. I'm hoping that it will just lower the D enough to give it clearance, so I don't feel obliged to knock this nut off and do a new one, because I don't really like to do that if it doesn't absolutely need it. And also, especially when you know that your customer is very used to this action, and it will be characteristic of this guitar for them, you know. For somebody who'd never played it before, if this was from a factory or something, then, you know, it's all new and you wouldn't know. But for a customer who knows this guitar, one of the biggest variables in it is what they know and expect of it. Even where they, you know, they may say, I don't like this because there's one tiny bit more in that G track again while I'm here. Yeah, so you know, that's I guess it's a variable to take into account, and it's hard to describe it, but you really have to factor in the scale of the difference for a customer. So you know, you can be sure that I could knock the nut off here, you know, create a nice low 1mm to 1.5 playing action, which would be pretty much like all the other ones that I do. The reason I'm doing this again is there's a little bit here that still isn't leveled out. Anyway, yeah. But the tiniest of adjustments make the biggest of differences to the customer's experience of the guitar. So you really do have to pay attention to what they will have known before about the guitar, because the changes will be shocking to some degree. You know, when a guitar is such a personal thing, we really do have to be aware of the importance of that feel thing. You know, you might say, well, it's only a 0.1 of a millimeter's difference. Okay, only 0.1 of a millimeter's difference, but the amount that translates to in feel can be so big that it's a shock. Now, I've never had anyone be so shocked that they go, no, it's horrible, I don't want that. But nonetheless, it is a big change, and I think it just is smart to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so like I said, I think in the end, I think I went for the 220 grit, because it's quite quick. But you know, as long as you know how to use the one you're using, if you're using 220, slow down, don't do as much, take it easier. If you're using the 400, you've got a bit more repetition to do. Now remember, this string was playing a little bit fuzzy on the on the basically the fretted notes. It was a little bit zingified, so I'm just going to see if we can clean up the notes. There wasn't much in the way of, I couldn't see much in the way of pitting or grooving. It was just a little bit about the action all the way across was a little less clear. So it's, in the end, it's quite a bit of leveling that goes on. Sounds much better. It's good. Yeah, there's a fair bit of work that goes on here, and to the newcomer to this, if you haven't done this before, this can still seem really intimidating. You might think, oh my god, what am I doing to this guitar? And I think it just takes experience and time to know what, you know, that what looks bad or like a lot of material actually is less than it looks, and also that when you clean something up with the sanding and the polishing, sorry, the recrowning or the reprofiling first and then the sanding and the polishing, it actually looks good as new, and your physical amount of material removed is very small. And we could confirm that, if you liked, by measuring the first fret action again. Even though it looks like a lot of fret material being taken from that, the actual first fret action on this will be barely changed from what it was before, despite all that dust. Tiny bit there. Partly because there's a little low spot here. We've got some too high there, too high at the end. So I've got to let this do its little scallopy work, a scallop, I don't know how you pronounce it, I don't eat the things, but there you go, you know what I mean. Because what happens is, when you're doing fret leveling, is low frets, for whatever reason, whether they've been leveled low to begin with, or that they've moved, or maybe they were leveled, as I said right at the beginning, without the longitudinal compression at play on the neck, then the frets can actually move in relation to the others, and there's a little low spot here, right at the top here, and that will cost you a tiny bit of clarity right here. Now the only way you're going to get rid of that is to keep on working these down a little bit. But having heard that Mark says he doesn't go anywhere near that, I don't think I'm going to cost any more fret metal for the sake of getting these three notes right here on the low E back into. The same applies on the A as well. I'm just going to do a tiny fraction more on the A, but you know, it's only from my obsessiveness. Mark's not really going to play those, and he certainly won't be. It's very unlikely to be playing them in some lead guitar break right at the top there. Whereas getting these things to bend is much more important relatively more important in the scheme of things we're aiming to do with this guitar. So I hope, for those of you who've never seen this method before, and I know many of you will have, if you haven't seen this method, I hope you get a sense of its kind of basic essential elegance, because that's what it is. It's a really common sense when you think it through. It's a very simple way of leveling frets in a kind of nice manual human way. You know, it's not putting it into a cabinet and sort of letting some machine do lots of mind-boggling things to it. You know, what we're doing here is we're using sort of basic principles of science and curves, if you like, stuff you don't have to understand, you just know that it works, to level off a bunch of things. And the beauty of them is, you see I'm dirty now, but the beauty of this is it's the thing that a lot of people who do this work just by chance don't do, and I didn't do until I came across that katana tool, which forced me to think about it, is a lot of people don't factor in the effects of the force of both ends of this guitar being pushed together. A lot of the jigs that people can make and buy seem to, I don't want to say obsessed, but you know what I mean, they seem to get obsessed by the curvature of the neck, and the curvature is secondary really. I only bend that tool because the neck's curved. I don't care that the neck's curved. What I care most of all, the reason the neck is curved is because I need this, of all the things that's important, it's this longitudinal compression. Yes, you also play with some curve in the neck, so you might as well, you know, but actually the truth is, if you did it, if there was no compression and you did it flat and then went like that, the frets are still relatively curved in relation to each other, unless the action of bending the neck pushed the wood somewhere in. But it's not so much the bending I've found, it's the compression that makes the frets do different things. And this method does the leveling with the compression in, as the compression is in when you're actually playing the guitar, because the strings are on and you're playing it. Now, that's pretty impressive. That's the A. Now, okay, we still have just that fraction of zzz. I'm loath to remove a well-fitted nut like this. Let me do the polishing, and then I will reconsider at the end. And if it's one of those things, if it's absolutely necessary, if there's no other choice but we have to do it, I'll do it. But the interesting part is that isn't anything that Mark complained about when he brought the guitar, or mentioned. So it's not something at the top of his mind, and I'm loath to knock off a nice joined original joint, if you like, to pursue something that wasn't on the focus or in the spot, you know, on the radar of the guitarist themselves. So it's a matter of factoring those things into it. Now, having done the fret leveling part, I can now remove these sacrificial strings, which I've got to unhook the little folded back bits. These are now spare. I can, if I'm smart, I'm going to hang them up and use them again some other time, but as sacrificial strings I have to hasten to add, I don't. Now what Mark's done is he's done a bit of a locking thing where the thing goes through twice here, which is quite good for holding it steady, although it doesn't stop the slack issue, the unreleased slack issue, but it makes it hard for the person like me to remove them. So the interesting thing now is that we've got a guitar with the frets relatively leveled to each other. I think this is, I'm going to lose these because these are locked through in the least movable, fiddleable configuration, unless I can pull this out somehow. Yeah, so we've got the frets leveled in a as strung playing configuration, and of course the good thing about that is, this is a pain, I hate it when they have to do this. The good thing about this is that we can do what we like now with the strings off, and of course the neck is now relaxing and it's going into a different configuration. But what will happen is when we put it under load with another set of 10s, obviously the same gauge, it will go back to where we just had it, and that relative, providing the load is almost dead the same or very nearly the same, the frets, the compression will be the same, the curvature will be the same, the relief I should say will be the same, and the neck will resume the kind of relative levelness that we just made for it, and that's what's nice about that method. And it's kind of done now, and then we can pretty much do loads of other things. We can take the, you know, we take the guitar apart. We could take, if it was a bolt-on neck, we could take the neck off, do what we like, and we will still. I think will I keep? No, I'll try and keep these. Yeah, we'll still. It'll revert to the. I have to flatten these. It'll take a bit of time. Tell you what, I don't need to do that. I'll do that off camera in a minute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just prep this. I don't mind. Somebody said to me, you seem to wipe the dust off instead of vacuum it off. I know it sounds silly, and I thought about why I do that. The reason I wipe the dust off is I don't like putting a metal-edged vacuum. I don't have a plastic. I don't think I've got a fancy plastic schnozzle, but somehow I don't like putting a metal-edged vacuum anywhere near the frets. I think early on one day when I was first doing frets, I think I did fret leveling, and then I used a Dremel to polish the frets at the end, and the chuck of the Dremel hit the frets, and I had to do it all again, and it cost me some of the life of the frets. Obviously it was my guitar as it happens, but I learned the hard way not to let anything metal hit the frets anywhere in this process, or you'll be starting again. So what I'm going to do is, when I'm here, I'm just going to re-profile, or some people call it crowning, I call it reprofiling the frets. So they're a little bit flattened as a result of this leveling, and we want to round them off so that they look more like, or that they can be as fret shaped as possible, without there being without reducing or changing the relative height. So to do that we use the StewMac crowning file. I'm using the medium size gauge on this one. It's a 300 grit file, and I'm going to use the medium because these aren't jumbo, they're sort of medium jumbo-ish. And so what I do is I just use this tool, and the concave base of this tool basically cuts away the sharp edges of the flattened spot, and in doing so it leaves, if we're careful, we do it so that we leave the black marker line on top, and that tells us, if we leave that there, it tells us we haven't touched the top of the fret, and therefore the top of the fret will, relative to all the other frets, be the same relative levelness that we had a minute ago, which was the point of doing this. So obviously you can see it's very important to do it, get it right. So you can see the process here is just changing the profile from flattened to as curved or as arch shape as we can, so that they're more like frets, traditional good old-fashioned frets. You can play them flattened, and I've seen a lot of, believe it or not, more than a few techs and luthiers who have done fret levelings and then just polish them up, and they don't do this stage. If you don't have one of these tools or something similar, then it can be a bit of a ball breaker, excuse the expression, because you have to use a three-sided file. I like to do it because it's brain off fiddly work, you know, and I put the radio on and lose track of time. But I guess some people, you know, it's too fiddly and they just get on and polish these up, and you still make them look great, but when you look at them really closely you can see they're quite flat. Most of the time it doesn't have too great an impact on how it plays, but before long you can actually get the frets so that they're flat enough that what happens is effectively the intonation point moves closer, so that the front edge of the fret becomes the intonation point, whereas it's designed to be dead center of the fret, and it moves forwards towards the nut, towards the bridge, and that changes your playing length for that string, which actually makes it out of tune with open strings or other strings that aren't affected in the same way. So it's not good technically to play with frattened flats. I know it's interesting, I've seen some of these Les Paul forums and stuff, and I know there are some people who swear by these incredibly flat, almost like wafer thin frets, but unless they are crowned in some sort of raised way, then they're going to suffer from an intonation problem. And on the close-ups that I've seen of them, they look like trouble waiting to happen, as far as I can see, and I can't, for all kinds of reasons, they do not seem like a good idea. Very, very tall frets, as a rule, will last you longer. Change the feel of the guitar, taller, wider frets. And if they're very, very tall, you can, if you press down too hard on them, i.e. you're used to making your finger connect with the fingerboard, and the fret's really tall, it would be like trying to get a scalloped fretboard and pressing the string right down to the bottom of the scalloped curve, which would guarantee to drive everything sharp, and you'd make a right old mess of a sound. So with a scalloped fingerboard, you have to learn the art of just fretting it with no more pressure than is required to touch the string against the fret, and that's quite hard. But if you have very tall frets, it can encourage you to continue pushing down to the wood and get quite messy, sharp notes. But that is definitely a technique thing. For me, if you want to bend notes, tall frets are really, because they're tall, by the time you've touched the string against the top of the fret, there's inherently more room for the sideways motion. There's more of your finger up against the side of the string, the higher the string is on the tops of the, sitting on the tops of the frets, the more of your finger is going to be pushing against it. If your frets are wafer thin low, by the time you've pressed the string onto the top, there's no space for your finger to go, and your finger tends to go over the top of the string, which can make bending really hard. So it depends the kind of frets you have and how you like them. It tends to be a lot to do with how you play. Okay, so having done this bit, you see it's pretty quick really using this tool, and that's why you pay for an expensive StewMac USA made tool, just for the convenience and the speed of the thing, or ease of use I should say. So once I've done this, then the next stage of this is to, well, do a couple of things. I'll line up to mask off the fingerboard. You see this is pretty mucky, so this guitar is going to get clean as we go. But the next thing to do would be to mask off this fingerboard, and then to polish up these frets into a nice shining playing condition. Just looking at this here, there's quite a bit of brown or grey stuff in here, so one of the things I will do, but I won't do it right now, is even if I'm happy to live with this nut, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen these slots, because the presence of this lubricant in here is telling me, and I can hear the pinging, which will be a major barrier to the guitar staying in tune, which obviously we don't want. So I am going to clean off, brush off this grit from having done this reprofiling thing, and then the next stage is mask it off and get ready to sand. And I'm not going to put that on video because it's boring, not like this isn't, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to use 3 different grits of paper, 600, 1000 and 1500, and then once I've done that, I do 2 pieces of each of those with a block, and then I'm going to switch to micro mesh to polish up the final finish. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take this tuner off, which I'll do now, just have a look at it while you're here. I'm going to take this tuner off and do my little bit of research over a cup of tea on what it's going to take to change out this thing. I don't want to glue it on if there's some sort of clever technical way that's always been done that I don't know about. It's not often I'd try and recondition a tuner. It's more a case of just I would tend to replace sets of tuners, but I have fixed a couple of faulty fenders in the past, for example on an old Mustang, but even then they were temporary fixes. So these screws are just falling out, so they really are a bit tired. Okay, so there we have our not quite standard replacement. I'm going to see if I can see why it's, what about it is loose. Well, I can see that the little tab that goes through here to hold it in place has either been broken off or it's too short or something. Probably find that, in fact I'm going to look at another one by comparison, see if they are even compatible in the long term, because it may just make more sense to, see, these are quite loose too, it may make sense to just spend 6 or 7 quid on a replacement one that you can see from the outset matches the colour. Especially if this one is started out being a little bit loose and never going to be able to improve it. These little boxes are held together by little metal tabs that push through, and typically you would try and tighten them up by pushing the tabs or bending the tabs a little bit. See, but this one looks even, is this one quite loose? This one's got a bit of play in it too, but I just picked them out to see the difference in them. This one's made in Germany, Gibson Deluxe, and this one, I've no idea. TPK license WD. So I don't know why this has got. Okay, that's why. This is Cluson Deluxe. This is Gibson Deluxe. That's why. So in fact, the Gibsons are sharper edged than the Clusons. So it's probably just as the best solution here is probably to get this one off and I'm not quite sure how we get it off, but we'll get this one off and try and replace it with the other one that matches. But I'll go and have a look and see what's the easiest way of doing it. But failing that, look for a Clousson Deluxe replacement will be the nearest thing. It looks, believe it or not, it looks nicer, more of a quality build. This one is fixed at one end and then presses down with a little tab that typically would bend over, but even that isn't bent over in this. That's as good as it's going to get. But yeah, this one, it's not that much looser than the other ones, I have to say. But maybe with this open it moves more. Without the little extra tab, it's quite difficult. It moves too much, so I'm not really quite sure how we're going to keep, if we use this one, how we're going to keep this absolutely flat, because unless we can squeeze that tab, but unless it came over the back here, it gives us room to squeeze it a bit more, it's still going to carry on rising off. Anyway, that was just a diversion. I'll come back to that in a minute. So, frets levelled, boring polishing part next, followed by an overall clean-up and a bit of tweak of the tuners if possible, or some recommendations. And while I'm at it, I'm going to give this a little bit of a clean-up and all that sort of stuff. I might blow some dust out of the pots. I'm not going to do anything else. Mark was talking about a little bit of movement in the pots, but it's inbuilt in the pots. But I'll have a look under the covers. This is currently set exactly at its position. I don't want to move it particularly, but I know what the measurement is. I know where I'm aiming for and resets. It's not critical, but sometimes if I'm feeling very precious about keeping that, I'll just put a bit of the old low tack masking tape over the top to just try and hold it in its place so it doesn't go anywhere. I don't know whether that works or not, but might just stop things bumping it. It's usually when you bump it that it moves around or spins around. If you just sort of cover it off briefly, momentarily, you tend to get away with it. Let's say this is low tack, so it comes off very easy. There's very little danger of it sticking to anything too hard. Okay, right. So I'll see you in a bit. Well, I'll see you when this is polished up, and whether I've made a decision on the tuner bit. But then it would be a case of restringing it or cleaning it, restringing it. But I'll probably you'll join me again in a minute when it's time to restring it, and the fingerboard will be also oiled a little bit, and it will be away. Okay, just to jump forward, fret levelling and polishing done, paper off, apart from the bit covering the bridge up. I've just done a little test of my scratch remover on the back here, and it brings it up a treat. So I've taken the tuners off here because I'm going to clean up the headstock, and the best way to do it is get the tuners and the truss rod cover off. The replacement widget is closer to the right colour than the original one, but unfortunately it's a bit transparent and you can see the metal peg through, so it's so-so. You probably still want to look out for a replacement Clousson instead of that Gibson one. But anyway, it's better than the other one. It had to break, unfortunately, the other one to get it off. There's no two ways about it. You have to sort of pincer it off. I'm just going to literally flip these off to flip them off. Get these off to a tiny spray of air, followed by a little dab of, oh no, that's moving, we don't want that. Yeah, not good. Too many moving things. Now this is tricky. Thankfully it's got the plastic here. We can get a bite on it with this pair of pliers. There's probably a proper knob for it, which I don't have, but I will do it with something like this, which allows me to get a bite on it. And it's obviously, occasionally on guitars where that isn't protected, it's not great because you can get very worried about touching the paintwork, but on this one it's nicely out of the way, thank goodness. So I can just put a little bit of a careful extra turn on this just to stop it from going anywhere in future. And that's about all I want to do with it, really. Yeah, lovely. And that actually straightens it up a bit as well. So while I'm at it, I will fire some air in there, just blow out any stuff, dust, steady on. I'll also do the same here, so we'll have a quick look in the business, and I'll check the jack socket for tightliness as well. I might put a tiny dab of my favourite blue Loctite on it just to make sure this doesn't come loose anymore. I think some have, saw somewhere advertised that there's an anti-slip one with a little retaining clip or pin or something, claw or something that stops it spinning round. I know they have that on some Strats, but here it's thank you. Yeah, pretty tidy. It's on a little metal plate. It's Gibson pots. I wonder if this is original. Yeah, it looks all original. Nice. I'll show you a quick look in the innards. Just going to check the jack thing. That looks pretty well done up actually. I'll use my no, it's got a bit of movement in it, so I will move it in two directions. Well, I'll undo it now. I'll do my adjustable spanner for that. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carry on doing these little bits of clean up for a minute, and then I'm going to undo this. It was loose, but I'm going to undo it first, and I'm going to treat it to a little dab of this with a bit of paper ready to catch the residue. I'm going to do a clean up. I'm going to use a little bit of my scratch remover on all of this, so particularly on the headstock and everything, to give it a really nice freshened up feel, and then do it all back up and get me, there you go, I'll take the bloody nut off. You can't really see this, but it's so hard to get the nut back on. Yay! Now I need to get my little StewMac tool going the opposite way now. Opposite way, please. Thank you. Opposite way, so I can do this up. Yeah, it's I'm going to clean it all up and then restring. Not the best spanner in the world for reaching these things. Rattle, clank. It's only on metal, so don't worry. Panicky not. Yeah, give it a good clean up, and that's why I like to take off the tuners, because you can get really good clean up going on the headstock, which you can't get. Can I get this to go smaller, please? You can't get any. No, it's bigger. Oh, hellfire! You can't get if you work around the tuners. It just doesn't really work out. Okay, now that's really nice and tight. And I can wipe off the extra bit of blue stuff, including off my carpet. Oh, but that isn't going to come undone, even though the jack part of the guitar is of course under a bit of leverage pressure. Electrical cleaner, missing the nozzle. Oh no, that's the nozzle. Thank you, nozzle. If you're going to shoot cleaner into anything, is this the right one for here? If you're going to shoot cleaner into anything, probably not. No, it's the wrong one. I will finish my sentence. If you're going to shoot cleaner into anything, do it very lightly and be careful not to let it run onto paintwork, because I don't think the propellant in here, that's what happens, the propellant in here doesn't agree with paintwork, so I'm going to use it very, very sparingly. I think I need some fresh air, canned air. I'm going to run out of air in this tank. Buy these in bulk every now and then. So a bit of air, so pardon the noise. I'll do the standing up so it can blow anything it needs to out. Mark, the key thing about the scratchy pots is you can do a little bit towards them with a little bit of this stuff, but the real difference is going to be in just using them. That's the main thing. They clean up as soon as you start using them. So if you want to, just sort of basically sit down and do them backwards and forwards a dozen times, and then they'll be fine. But it does take use to get them cleaned up. They'll just accumulate layers of atoms of grime, I suppose you could call it, and they'll stay that way until they get used again. A bit of cleaner helps, but you know, it is you know, it's a little film of atmospheric gunk, I suppose, builds up on the contact surfaces and they get a bit crackly. But everything was working fine in here, so all we've just done is added a little bit of a sort of housekeeping jet of fresh air and a tiny bit of electrical cleaner, and also just visually having a quick look and making sure there's nothing. I mean, obviously it's working, but just make sure there's nothing clearly about to break off or something like that. Sometimes you might find something hanging on by a thread, and you just think, well, you know, I can just dab solder on that and make a new joint. Otherwise, it won't take me 2 seconds, but you know, 5 minutes down the line, it might come apart for the player, for the customer, and it's horrible when that happens. Okay, so I'll show you me doing the headstock bit on this because it's really mucky, but I'll then go off camera, I think, and do the rest. So here we have, I'm going to put the light on for a bit. It's winter in here. It's not like I haven't got lights on or anything, but you know. Massimo, how are you doing out there in Milan? You northern Italian, you. Had a nice chat on Skype the other day. And discussed the differences in people all over the world. Okay, so first of all, a bit of a clean off. Now I'm not going to go over this as it stands in solvent naphtha or anything, because this stuff tends to be really good at taking like the grime layer off. So it does the job that the naphtha would do anyway. If I wasn't going to do this, then yes, I would get the kind of you know, the naphtha solvent stuff on it, and it's pretty harmless. For your information, I've experienced naphtha in the past has interfered with certain ancient paints on vintage Strats and things like that, Strats and bullets. You know, so you can't assume that naphtha is utterly inert with everything it comes across, but mostly in terms of nitro lacquer and stuff like that, it's pretty safe to use. Okay, so there's a freshen up on the headstock that you just couldn't get. It's got a shine, I don't know if you can see it, but it's got a nice shine to it now that it didn't have before. And then I would basically spend a fair bit of time doing the back, and I'm pretty much out of this cleaner at the moment. So it'll be the last ditch of this bottle on this guitar, but I must note to self get some more. But it's a nice little touch to just bring a bit of refresh it. Yeah, you know, you get a little bit in the tuner hole, so it doesn't matter, that's hidden from view. This goes in there. Tuner holes are always full of paint and buffing polish, you know, and buffing compound and stuff like that. It's just the way they are. But even just to rub up and down the side like this with a rag with this scratch cleaner on, just takes that grime layer off and gives you a shine that you never had for years, in fact. So it's really nice. And then I'll just put a little bit down there and onto here and so on, and off we go. So I'll be back when all of this is done. I'll do the front as well, and then I'll be back when the strings are going back on. Hold on.
I've known him.
Mark, I don't know if you noticed, this is quite interesting. Just for your information, doing this scratch cleaner stuff shows you up some things you might not have seen visually. That's a crack you've got from the corner of your nut down into the neck. That's the result of your headstock being hit, okay? I'll take close-up pictures for you. It's not severe, and if the guitar's been playing fine as it is, I wouldn't say you have to do anything with it. It looks pretty stable, but just be wary, that goes down to about here. Okay, and it's because of the paint, you know, the cracked stuff has gone into there. But that's the result of this bang it's taken on the side. So I just thought I'll carry on doing this now. Just thought I'd let you know. I hadn't seen it. You probably knew anyway, but I only saw it when I kind of cleaned it or rubbed it with this stuff on this side, actually over here, and I saw the white up here where the polish has caught on the crack. But just FYI, so you can keep an eye on it. Like I say, if it's not going anywhere or it hasn't in the time since it took a knock, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not something I would attempt to fix at this point anyway, because you know, ideally you'd want to prise that crack apart to get some glue into there, and I'll clean that off with a little bit of water so you don't really show up. But yeah, in fact I can tell you, where does it go to? It goes to about there. So it's definitely, that's a crack in the lacquer, and I would suggest it's probably a crack in the wood too, despite what some people like to say. It won't be a significant structural one, but it will be one. So I know this is going to be this is your keeper guitar, but just you know, just FYI, as they say. Anyway, this will be boring for you, so I'll see you in a bit. Slightly annoying little things here. We've got everything cleaned up beautifully, and stuff, but there's a little piece of plastic on the traditional plate has just come away, so it's just chosen this moment to divest itself. Basically a little bit just, it's been broken when it's been tightened up in the past, and it's broken in 3 places. In fact, it will go back on without it, but here's the fun part. Let's see if I can take 3 broken parts, make them into one whole. Holy canoodles, this is going to be small. It's not exactly going to withstand any downward pressure, so this thing is as it is. There's no kind of, there's no sort of real fixing it. It is what it is, i.e. broken. So I'm just going to try and, what I really need a tiny bit between these 2 bits here as well. Now it's all got very sticky all of a sudden. Let's put that on there, put that up against there. Woohoo! That's pushed it into place. A couple more sticks. Come on, sticks. Oh lordy. Let's chop one of these off with this to make a little flat thing to hold this down thing. And fill this glue into it's gone off sideways. It really isn't a very good thing. Now that's onto there like that. Now I want a piece of paper, post-it note. Let's see if we can, I really want it flat, but let's see if we can in the meantime slide it off onto this post-it note as is. There we go. Stick it there and do a little bit of pushing and prodding into place. Ah! There's a big hair caught up in it now. Brilliant. Hairy. Oh, come on, we don't need hairs involved in this game. Right, we nearly had it. Right, got 3 separate bits now, because this is now falling into even smaller parts with added hair. Damn. Right, part 1, get that hair gone. No, can't, maybe. Right, I've got the chance to remove the hair first. Okay, this is where I feel like a 500-foot tall giant. I hate being so undexterous, isn't it? So lacking in dexterity. There's one piece, and I picked up the other piece with my clumsy other hand. Oh lordy, can't even get it to stay on the ground because it's got hair stuck to it. Fur. This is not really, it's not really going anywhere, this game. Little blob over the edge. trying to guide this little piece into its place now. Get in there. Come on. No, it's practically impossible. It's wishful thinking, really. It's broken, it's kind of broken. And that's your lot. Yep, it's refusing to hold together. Oh well. Of course, what probably would work better than super glue is a bit of resin. But even that isn't going to be a very pretty arrangement. You can see it's properly shattered. Let's add a bit of glue to the back of here in a vain hope that it will percolate through. It's just going to end up looking uglier than if there was none there at all. There you go, that's sort of old plastic for you. My feeling about that is this will have broken on the when it was done up, because it would have been crushed, and it's just fallen apart on unscrewing, which was my good luck to be the one that unscrewed it. But yeah, just never get it lined up. It'll end up breaking off again as soon as I put a screw on it. But hey, the screw hides it anyway. But I thought I'd try. Forgive me. I guess I'll leave it off now, in the sort of vain hope that it will set in some way. Stick it on there. Not really a lot to do with that. Alternatives is to build a little metal plate and put the plastic back onto a little very thin tin plate, but then the whole thing has to sit on it and it raises it up a little bit. So I'm just going to clean this super glue off my fingers. It has a habit of getting everywhere you don't want it. Okay, so I have cleaned the guitar, ready to now basically oil the fingerboard and put the strings on, and then there'll be a little tiny bit of tweaking of the action height. So somewhere the oil, thank you. Yes, yeah, a little bit of adjustment of the height, and then checking the intonation, and then putting this little thing back on. Now I'm going to change over and do this with cloth, because this leaves bits of lint behind, which is mighty annoying. So let's use this. This is also a good opportunity to clean any remaining marker pen that's still on the metal. Sometimes you can get some down the side of it, and then you'll see it sort of come off on the cloth as well. What a shame that thing's broken. But it's just as it is. You get a lot of that on the older Strats, where the pick guard just cracks around the holes, and you end up with extra or loose bits of pick guard hanging onto the, stuck to the wood, and everything sort of stays in place, just mainly because that's how it was. But it doesn't move because the cracks are sort of aligned. But the minute you undo it. I guess I would say this guitar has been refretted somewhere. I feel it just looking at the working around the edge of the fingertip makes me feel like it has, but I don't know, because if Mark's had it from new, then he will know. I'm just going to take the excess off here. I don't necessarily need it to be drizzled in oil, it just needs enough to make it nice and moisturised, if you get what I mean. Right, so I've cleaned the bridge, I've cleaned the stop bar, so we're going to go over the back and over the top. We're facing the bridge backwards. I've got these two little screws here which go with the other thing in cover, truss rod cover, and we've got our 10s here. Now we're going with blue up to reds. Has this one got a spare set? No, this is a multi-pack then. That's okay, I've usually got some spares. So for this, I'm going to go from the front, yes, from the front on all of these. So I'm just going to load this up from the front, and then I'm going to put one round the tuner just to get the stop piece held in place, because otherwise everything dangles around like crazy. So as I've said millions of times before, the secret to stable tuning, whether it's a Les Paul or a Strat or pretty much any kind of guitar actually, is to ensure that your nut slots are wide enough, i.e. cut correctly. Wide enough meaning they're not so wide that the string moves from side to side too far, but wide enough meaning that the string never is gripped by the slot. You'd be amazed how quickly, well, you probably wouldn't be amazed when you look at it. I draw it out on the board in a minute actually. The thing about the people, I think people don't, why would they think through? I mean, who thinks this through? Who thinks this through? That's right, it's upside down, Sam. Duh. My little normal clip where things hang on is upside down. Right, yeah, a quick wipe of the board. Oh yeah, what did I say? Very low, 1.3 to 0.75. That was what we ended up with. I'll just write that somewhere sideways so I've got it still. 1.3, 0.75 was my targets. Yeah, just as a quick, just move things around, a quick momentary lapse of whiteboard. This thing about nut slots is quite telling really, because if you think about a nut, all right, and then you've got a slot. Let's draw the slot comps out. Okay, so you've got a slot that you've cut with a file. Okay, now the truth is, if that's a Les Paul nut slot, the truth is it isn't really cut like that. It's cut like this. I mean, that's exaggerated, okay? I'm going to exaggerate for a point. The thicker it is in this direction, the more likely you're going to get these kind of undulations or twists or curves. Now, if you think that, if you imagine that you're using a, that was really good. How about I just put this somewhere else for a minute? Please stay there without throwing yourself poltergeist-like on the floor. Okay, the wider this is, the harder it is going to be to cut a dead level thing. Now, let's imagine above, we'll take an above one, let's imagine we had a machine that somehow miraculously cut a dead straight thing, badly drawn by me. Alright, let's say that was your fantastic machine. And let's say that was, let's call it, or whatever, let's call it 0.010 gauge. That was a 10, that was a top E, right, on a 10 set. And if you cut that at 0.010 and you put your 0.010 string in, right, that, as you know from kind of measurement, that string would go through that touching, right, because they're the same gauge, right. Now it doesn't take you 2 seconds to see that there's no leeway here for anything to intrude into that space. So if you cut it under 0.10, it won't move at all, you won't get it in there. And if it's slightly bent like this, let's see what happens when our 0.10 string, there's a gap there, it gets stuck there, there's a gap there, there's a gap there, it gets stuck there, there's a gap there, gets stuck there. So all it takes is the tiniest wiggle for this 0.10 to be completely stuck, right? So for that reason, I tend, knowing that the Les Paul nut is quite wide, I tend to use, let's say if you wanted a top E, I'd probably use a 13 file, knowing that it's not going to be laser flat or laser straight. And of course the wider the nut, the bigger, the more likely you are to get that problem. If you have a Strat nut, it's relatively narrower or not as wide. So you can get away with a closer gauge if you want to. But what I tend to do is I tend to do a bit over, so I choose a higher set for what I'm doing, knowing that it's never going to be absolutely perfectly straight. And what I then do is I'm prepared to use a bit of sandpaper on the edges when the strings are in place and I've got the heights to the right height, the first fret action is correct, and then I listen out for the audible pings, and you really can hear it, and you heard it on this guitar to begin with. And so long as it's pinging, it means it's getting hung up inside this. Even if it's oversized, you'll still hear it pinging, which means it only takes the tiniest bit of curvature, which you can't see with the naked eye when you're down to this sort of size, the tiniest curvature to snaffle up the difference between that 10 and that 3 even. So you've got to work the slots until there are no more pings. Once you've got it to no more pings, and there's plenty of time to do that while you're doing the setup or changing your strings or whatever, once you've got it to no more pings, then you can put some lubricant in, and only then. And that's like a lubricant then just becomes a graphite icing on the cake, on the nutty cake, if you get what I mean. But absolutely don't try and cure the sticking nut slots with graphite or pencil or whatever, because it just won't work. It'll wear through, or it'll run out, or it'll get oh my god, do you know what, I've done this backwards? No, I haven't done it backwards, I thought I'd gone mad. Yeah, it won't work because it's just it'll wear off the graphite, and then you'll be back to that wavy line pinching on the strings, and you'll just be going mad. Now I'm just going to pull this first low E round through the forest of stuff, and this time, I don't know if you can see this, this is how I would do it. It's only just one way. Now I've switched over and put I've done it the back to front. I didn't really want to do that. I intended to do this the opposite way round, but I can't. It's got to be on that side. So I've gone to the high E with that one. Sorry, my mistake. I thought I was going to put it to the low E, but of course I can't. It's two-sided. Never mind. Anyway, so I pull the string through, making sure it's all pulled tight at the bottom end. There's no slack waiting to jump through. And then I pull back nearly a fret. And then I start and I wind on, and I'm holding this now so that the held string goes over the top of the loose string on the first run round, keeping it all sort of tight. And then I bring the held string underneath the loose string by yanking that up and pressing the held string down on the second run round. And this just puts almost nearly two runs of string round. And then we're done. That's on, and then it's only a matter. It's the kind of the smallest, least amount of string I think is safe. Now on this guitar, because it's got a thumb wheel style bridge adjuster, and we need this thing slack early on to do the height adjustment. We can't tighten it all up. I'm going to do the top E next. Yeah, you do. I think you really want to look for a replacement one of these. Getting the actual original Clousson Deluxe. This works fine, but it just doesn't look as good as the others. There we are. It's better than the green one that was on there. So I'm just doing the high E as well. Now it gives me the two strings that I can use to set my playing action, and while I'm there, just because I don't like mess, I'm going to snip off the excess right away so I'm not dealing with loads of excess string. Okay, so now at this point in time I'm going to get my other specs out again, and this, while the strings are complete, well, not completely, but pretty slack, I'm going to aim to use the thumb wheels. This is quite a difficult operation because the thumb wheels are really relatively stiff. Now I'm going to put it under as much tension as I can to just keep it where I want it, but not make it impossible to dial up. Okay, so I'm looking at 1.2, a tiny bit below what it was, and then I'm going to go back up on this side until I reach, now this was 0.75 if you remember, and I'm going to go a fraction above that so that we clear those, any choking whatsoever. Now that's so little above it, again very loosely attached, so we may find that the action changes a tad when we tighten up. I suppose the quickest way to do that now is to put these under a bit of load and then check the action again under this. Obviously the string is, the neck isn't going to bend much yet, and so things will change even slightly again. 1.3ish, 0.9. I'm happy with that for now as my start. Now I'm going to go back to the end here and bring through t'other. So pulling back nearly a string's worth, a fret's worth, sorry, over the top first time, holding it down under the second time round. It's get pretty quick at it. And it's very tidy if you do the same thing every time, of course. I mean, I can see that Mark was doing that with his locking arrangement, but as I said, I think it was a little bit, well, I wouldn't say, no, I take that back, it's not unsafe in terms of the strings aren't going to slide, but what there was clearly a lot of slack still in it because I pulled quite a handful out, major detuning in one go. So the same applies. That locking system does work, it's fine. I'm just doing it my habitual way because I enjoy the way it looks mainly. So pushing everything through, switching hands and sort of working back to front for this end of the headstock, this side of the headstock. Tend to be, you don't need to pull back as much string for the treble strings. They tend to start wrapping around a bit further. I don't know why, but, and I'm doing that sort of finger gymnastic to steer the strings where I want them to go, whilst keeping them taut enough so they don't ping back off the thing, that whatever it's called, peg. What are the peg heads? That's what people, that's not what Americans call them. Anyway. So Massimo, you have your cup of tea ready for this long video, but what you'll notice, I suppose, that this isn't really that any different from any other setup that I do. Exactly the same principles. I'm working off most of the setup dimensions that were already on here, including the amount of relief. You know, it's purely a taste thing, how you like to feel it, and I'm not going to, in this case, with a new guitar that isn't set up at all to a user's preference, or something that's so has never been set up, so it's just as it came from a kid's bedroom or something, then I'll quote unquote impose my preferred 0.25 millimeters of relief on it, on the neck. But this guitar has come from somebody who's owned it for years, and it's got 0.3 of relief, and it's how they know it. So I'm not going to change that without a specific situation where it needs to be changed, and I don't notice that right off. So my first pull, like this, I missed that one. My first pulls are long ways, okay, in this case not always that way, but, and I'm pulling this just to get everything sort of seated so there's no, we can sort of tighten up any obvious slack. Right. Now what I'm going to do So I'm going to just stretch out every string individually. I wish I could do something with that broken bit of it. I probably should have just left it, to be honest. So I'm just thumb and forefingering these strings. Remember, we know from the beginning of this, a few hours ago now, a couple of hours ago at least, we know that the top 3 strings are pinging, and that was confirmed, or the strings were sticking in the nut slots, and that was confirmed by the pinging and the pinging sound, and then the fact that we found graphite in there as well, so that it's clear that they've been sticking and somebody's been trying to free them up. So next I'm going to get a tuning. Right, I'm going to go and do some more mending. And then what I'm going to do, once I've got the tuning stable, I'm just going to play it a little bit, and I'm going to kind of look at this nut and decide whether I can live with the D being close to the the slot being so, or the string being so close to the fret on the first fret, and it still is. The fret leveling won't have taken that much off as to change it significantly. Well, we've got the bends there, you see? That's the improvement. We've got the most of the wear taken out. There's a tiny little hint of well, there was, but it's sanded out actually. But we've got the wear gone. No more. There's no more bits. You know what we call it. No more chips in the frets. Can I visually see where it used to be? Possibly. There's a faintest kind of impression where it used to be, and I stopped at that point rather than go any further down. So it's good. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to straight away do a little bit of sandpapering there with the 600 grit, a bit of 600 grit, and a blade. And this is just a sort of starter, and I'm just going to see if this will cure any or prevent any future pinging. And so I'm just using, you can see, right, I'm using the blade and going into the slot. Is very, very beautifully done. I'm just going into the slot sideways on more than anything, just to widen it that tiny bit. It's quite difficult with something as low as this. Almost anything, any movement could runs the risk of lowering it, and we really haven't got much to play with on this. On most guitars we've got a lot more, but so I'm trying to sort of concentrate on sideways movement for wideness, wideness, you know what I mean. Next, this one's pinging, so I'm just gonna, fingers crossed, hope this one gets rid of that last little bit of ping. That's so fine. I'm going to just try and use this on its own. It's really difficult to get any purchase on it. still need a tiny bit of encouragement by the edge of the blade. Pushing a bit sideways with my fingers, so we get that bit of width. Okay, that's good. So a bit more pulling in the longitudinal division. I want every bit of possible stretch out of this before I hand it back to Mark for playing. Now as I'm tuning, I'm listening to and feeling the pings of any pings on the nut. So it's good to do this in a quiet place. So once this turns freely, like it is now, with no pings, I guarantee that as soon as we've got the residual slack out of here, this won't go out of tune anymore. Very close. Last couple of big pulls and we will be pretty much done in the stretching department. Often I break an E at this point. I think I heard a ping there. And there. A and B. Right, A and B. Quick go at the A. Quick go at the A, and this time I'm going to turn it back to front, use the fatter edge without chopping my fingers off of the blade. Again, just working the side really. That's all I want, is a bit of extra width. When you've undone the string, give it a good stretch again. Now we say B. Sharp edge. This is very finely cut. I mean, they've done a really good job of cutting just a little slot into the top of the curved nut here, which is actually what's quite nice about this nut. A lot of the Les Paul or SG nuts come with the flatter nut top. And that, what that does is it kind of makes it harder to do such a neat little curved jump off that this one has. So I'm impressed with the shape and finish of it. Right, I'm going to make an executive decision here. This nut business on this guitar is minor. So my decision is based on this. It came with this action on the D string. It wasn't mentioned by Mark, so it wasn't something that seemed to be a top of his mind problem. And the rest of the action is pretty good, and everything else works, and it plays really nicely now. We've taken away the wear and tear from the frets. We've polished them up nicely, given it new, a nice new finish. Cleaned up the whole guitar, taken the pick guard off, cleaned it, cleaned the chrome, taken the back off, given the electrics a bit of a clean out and shoot with some cleaner. Taken the tuners off, clean the headstock, replaced the tuners, put new strings on, taken off the truss rod cover, and unfortunately found a broken off bit, which I'm just going to make sure it's got no wet glue on it. I'm just going to put it back on like this, and it's just, it'll cover it, the screw will cover it over, but it's a shame. It's a shame. Yeah, so, and it plays really well, so I'm not going to trouble in this respect. It's really good. I'm not going to knock this nut out and go to the trouble of, you know, shaping a brand new one probably from a the we'd probably need to do to make it work, same as this, because it does everything it needs to do. The action is extremely low, but that's how it came. And okay, so that's it's not perfect, but it's back on there. The reason I say I think this has been refretted is I can see where some of the fingerboard chips have come out with the previous frets. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We've got the bends. Now this is creaking, and the saddle's creaking a little bit. I'll do some more bends when I play it later on. We'll give it a test play later on. It's going to be pretty much rock solid. There we are. So Gibson Les Paul traditional with a Dickey tuner, which has got a sort of temporary plastic peg replacement. So it looks a bit, at a distance it looks like it matches better, but it's a bit see-through for my liking. You can see the metal thing shaft going in. It's got a crack, as you can see here, where it was dropped on that side, which broke the tuner in the first place. That has sustained a crack, which is not dangerous, and it's clearly not opened up, or it's not doing anything under pressure, but it's worth keeping an eye on that, and you might want to think about a fix on that later on, possibly. But it's probably, if it doesn't affect the playing, then it won't need doing anything unless you drop it again and it opens up into a bigger crack, in which case you can glue it. But as it stands, it's right. Okay, there we go. So yeah, just rescued those notes basically, and cleaned up the wear, and overall a very well set up guitar. So my verdict, well set up. My verdict would be, if this really was from the Plek machine, as opposed to, and I'm not sure, this has the feel of a hand set up guitar, but I don't know anything about its history, so if this was Pleked, if the last time it was set up it was Pleked, then it's got to a very nice low playing action, with probably lower than I would want to go, unusually low first fret action, as you remember, between 0.4, was it, no, 0.6 I think, 0.4, something like that, 0.4 and 1.4, 0.6 and 1.4, so it's incredibly low, much lower than I would go. 0.006, sorry, to 0.014. No, well, I'm talking millimeters, not inches. 0.06 up to as much as 0.14 of a millimeter. That's just, the highest one was just over a tenth of a millimeter. The lowest one was under a tenth of a millimeter. Much lower than I would go. I would go for between 0.3 and 0.2 at the lowest. But there we go, that's what's been done. But it has a very low action, and it came originally with 0.75 on the last top fret high E. At the moment that's a fraction over that now. and then on this side it's practically the same, so it's just a tad higher to ensure that we've got those bends which geometrically are kind of impossible to get. I've never had a guitar, I've never set up a guitar with 0.75 on the last fret on the top E, but lovely, there we go, Gibson. But you know, just one thing before I go, right, I loved the sound of the pickups just from what I heard earlier on. I have set up lots of these, I suppose, over time, you know, in 400 plus setups. I have seen a lot of Les Paul copies and one or two Gibson Les Pauls and quite a few Epiphone Les Pauls. And I have to say, I love today, I like the sound of these pickups a lot. So to me, that's the quality in this. Honestly, about the finish and the materials and everything else, yes, okay, the electrics are nice, they're in a nice little plate, whatever. But, you know, the question is how much do they contribute to the sound of it? Don't know. Hard to quantify. But apart from the electrics or the pots, let's say, and the pickups, I have to say everything else about this isn't that much different from a vintage V100. I know it's a Gibson, it's made in America, and of course it's worth more because of that, right? There's no doubt about that. But actually, and you've got these little nibs which can be a really annoying pain in the butt. If you want to come and refret them, you have to either lose them or work inside them, which is really difficult. You probably break them off when you try and defret it. But anyway, but apart from that, but honestly, there isn't that much difference in construction, feel, and play ability. There's a little crack in there too. There's not a million miles. If you just forget the brand for a minute and the fact that it's got 3 bits of wood on the headstock and the word Gibson and stuff, this could be a nice new AFD vintage, you know, Paradise thing, or a V100 lemon drop, or a Rally lemon burst. And the great thing is on tomorrow's day, Malcolm's coming over, my good mate Malcolm coming over, and he's bringing his Rally lemon burst, and he'll get a chance to just make a quick comparison with this, because I'm really interested in that experience. But Malcolm is utterly in love with his Rally lemon burst guitar, and it is a beaut and it plays gorgeously. But I reckon, you know, if you are on a budget of any kind, get yourself a vintage V100 or an Epiphone or a Rally GL300, and I'll be having a GL400 in a couple of weeks' time, I think, from Hugh as part exchange for some fretting and setup work. But get yourself one of those, as long as it's got this nice set necky, kind of chunky body, full weight body, it feels like this. Get yourself one of those, and then maybe if you can get it for maybe £100 somewhere or whatever, and then find yourself a £250 set of pickups and shove them in there, and then spend a bit of money if you want to upgrade the pots. But the truth is, the tuners play no part in keeping it in tune, right? It's the nut, the slots, and the stretch or the slack in your strings. That's pretty much entirely what has to do with keeping it in tune. So it doesn't matter whether your tuners are the original ones or the Wilkinson ones. You don't have to go and spend on Gibson tuners or Cluson or anything like that. You can spend more money if you like a finer gearing and you like the difference in the feel. But what I did there, to just make sure the slots are clear, get rid of the pinging, I could actually put some graphite in there now, I've got rid of the pinging. But the tuning is all in getting the nut right, which I had a head start on this guitar, and getting the slack out of the strings. You get that right, you'll have rock solid tuning, and the quality of your tuners really has nothing to do with it. So everything down to, there's only significantly different thing here from a V100, a Rally or an Epiphone is the pickups. So the rule of thumb for me at Relove Guitars is, if you get one of these basics, give it a great setup, learn to do the setup, buy my ebook, which will tell you everything I do to achieve what I just did there. Give it a great setup, better if you can do it yourself, you don't pay any money, and then spend the money you save on £250, £300 set of the best pickups money can buy. Then you're going to hear the difference, and then you're going to keep that guitar. And who cares if it's got Gibson? And actually, if you took it out and it got stolen, right, you've lost £300 or £400, not £1,700 or whatever. Okay, there you go. That's my impression. I'll see you for the next guitar. In fact, the next guitar is going to be an Epiphone Jumbo, and that's going to also be Mark's guitar, but I'll get on to that a bit later. What time is it now? Oh, it's 6:30. I'll do it shortly. I'll start shortly. See you in a bit.